All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome back to another episode of ITProTV podcast. I'm your host, Don Pezet, here today with a very special hurricane episode, and in the studio to join me is Mr. Daniel Lowrie. Daniel, thanks for joining us.
Not a problem. Always enjoy coming on the podcast with you, talking about interesting things. Definitely got an interesting topic for us today, don't we?
Yeah. So it's all over the news. You know, it's kind of unavoidable, but this is the time of year that we get hurricanes. It's hurricane season.
What's a hurricane?
And yeah, and as a company based in Florida, we're used to it, right? We deal with this, and it's funny to us. It shouldn't be funny because it can be tragic, but the funny part is how all the other states react, right? So all across the U.S., people really get in a panic over hurricanes, but as long as you're prepared, they're really not that big of a deal. That if you take the proper preparations, you will be just fine. And as an IT worker, there are preparations you should be taking inside of your company to make sure that the company is going to be just fine during a disaster as well. And we're focused on hurricanes because, well, as you can see behind us here, we're located right here. So
you'll notice that that's kind of right inside the wheelhouse of where this hurricane is kind of heading.
Yep. So that's what we're thinking about. But, you know, you might have earthquakes or tsunamis, blizzards, volcanoes.
Yeah, they still exist.
And all of that is stuff that you have to plan for just as well. And in a typical company, in a large organization, a company that's well planned and well prepared, you're going to have two things, right? You're going to have a BRP and a BCP, a business resumption plan and a business continuity plan. And those two plans are going to tell you exactly what to do when a disaster happens. So no panic, no freaking out, no going crazy and worrying. You've got this plan. But let's pretend for a moment that you went to work for a company.
Picture yourself in Sicily, 1922. Right?
So you go to work for a company and they don't have a BRP. They don't have a BCP. That this stuff isn't documented. And you've got a disaster coming. You got a real problem.
Right. And if you're in a smaller company, that could very well be the case. Maybe you've just got going, right? You've only been in business for 6 months, a year, 2 years even, and you've just never gotten around because your company hasn't grown to that size where it was forefront of your mind. But now a storm is coming, and all of a sudden, maybe I need to think about these things a little sooner than I thought I would have to. So that's kind of where we're heading today. You've got very little time, but you need to do something to make sure that your data and your business is secured.
All right, so let's think about what these things do, right? So a business resumption plan and a business continuity plan. A lot of them
similar.
You'll hear people get them confused. They'll use them interchangeably, which they're not. They're different, right? So a business continuity plan is how you can continue to do business even during the natural disaster. So, you know, when it's something like an earthquake, earthquakes usually don't last very long, right? They're very short. So continuing business during the earthquake is not something you really have to plan for. But a hurricane, it may hang out for a few days. They move pretty slow. So the odds are we're going to be affected by weather for multiple days, right? So we need a way to continue doing business during the disaster. And we might not be able to continue business at 100% of our normal capacity, right? Maybe it's 30% of our normal capacity, but at least we continue to do business. We didn't just have to shut the doors, and that was
we have continuity. It continues to go.
Yep, and that is a big part of it. Business resumption, on the other hand, the BRP, that's how do you get back to 100%? And BCP is really urgent. BRP usually isn't. You can take a little more time. It might take days, weeks, it might even take years for you to get all the way back to 100%. But as long as you're able to continue doing business while you're not at 100%, you'll be fine. So these two plans are really what covers that. And if you've got them, they're your safety net. They're the ones that have all the information you need to be able to get in there and function and be okay. So what if you don't have those? If they're missing? Now is when the panic can set in and you can make mistakes. You can overlook things. So we're going to talk about some of the different things we can do here just to, just say, screw it. I got 3 days. What can I get done and protect my company?
Well, Don, I start thinking immediately of the personnel, right? We got to make sure that everyone's safe. That's top priority. Human life is infinitely more valuable than any data that you have on any server. So let's make sure that those people are safe, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. If you lose a server, if you lose a building, you can buy another building, right? But human life is the most important. So you need to have a plan for the human beings. And that plan, it can be a little bit tricky because if the weather is really bad, and we'll use this hurricane as an example, our building, This studio is actually practically a bunker. When this building was originally built, it was a local cell phone carrier. This was their CO, their central office. And so it was built as a tier 1 emergency service and just, I mean, really built like a bunker. This building would be really safe to be in during a hurricane. So for our employees, it might not be a bad idea to have them come here, even bring their families if they want to, if you've got the facilities for that. But most of them will choose to stay home, right? Stay home unless an evacuation order is put in which case you got to leave, right? But what about after the disaster? I remember Daniel and I, we used to work for an insurance company together many years ago, and I lived on the other side of town.
Yep.
And a hurricane blew through, and I physically could not drive to work. There were trees blocking every single road between me and the company.
Yeah.
And so I had to either be able to work remotely or not work at all. And in my case, because I had no power at the house, it was not work at all. That was basically how it was. At a time when my company really needed me, I wasn't able to be there for that because of the blocked roads. So you've got to have a plan in place for that. Your critical employees, if it's safe, should be at the building already. And that way, and you probably remember, Daniel, like a lot of the executives and stuff had couches in their offices.
Yes.
And the whole reason they had a couch was that they could sleep there if they needed it.
It's funny, after you left, we didn't have a natural disaster, but we had a disaster with our backups. And we were sleeping in our offices, staying there doing shifts 24/7 until that got back up and running. So it might be a good idea, especially if you know that it's coming. Like Don said, he couldn't get across town to get there when they needed him most. Maybe, you know what? There's a hurricane coming. Maybe you want to go ahead and come here and prepare to be here during that time, as long as there's no evacuation order, that kind of thing.
Right.
So that you can work and be effective.
Yep. And then the other thing is you don't want your employees feeling they've got to come into work when the roads may still be dangerous.
Right.
With an earthquake, there's aftershocks. With a hurricane, the storm usually lasts for a few days. So you want to make sure that people are safe, that their families are safe. So come up with that plan first, right? Let your employees know, hey, you know what? The storm's going to be hitting Monday, so if it's really bad, we haven't made a decision on this yet. We'll make a decision on Friday. So it's Wednesday. The storm isn't supposed to hit here until Monday, so we got several days to plan. So on Friday, we can tell our employees, hey, you know what? Let's all just take Monday off. Stay home. Keep your family safe. Or maybe by that point, the storm has changed direction, and it's not a problem at all, right? We don't want to make decisions too early and then affect the company. So that's a part of it. We get that advantage with a hurricane. You don't get that advantage with an earthquake or I guess a volcano.
It would probably, you could probably even come up with a few different contingencies based off of variables. Obviously, maybe the hurricane makes a wide sweep one way or the other, and it's going to miss us completely. So we have a contingency. Instead of taking off Monday, we'll be at work on Monday, or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just going to be based off of a set of variables that you could foresee.
Yeah. One thing that you need to prioritize is put together a phone list. You need to have cell phone numbers, home phone numbers for employees. A lot of times we have their work numbers, their extensions at the office. That's not going to help in a disaster. You need to be able to reach your employees for two reasons. One, so you can communicate to them. Don't come into the office. Or, hey, I need you. Get here. We need to be able to communicate. But two, so you can find out if they're safe. You need to check in on your employees, your coworkers, their health. So make sure that you've got that phone list. Right. Definitely, if you got a couple of days, it doesn't take much effort to put together a phone list. You don't even need an IT person. You can just get any employee and make their job. Get me a current phone list of all the employees. All right. So that's the human element, right? Yeah. We need to plan for that. Now let's talk about the data element. If you're entirely in the cloud, then this is the time you reap the most benefit, right? And that's how we are here at ITProTV. All of our servers, if you're watching this podcast right now, it is not coming from our studio. It's being streamed through servers that are part of either Amazon CloudFront or Akamai or somebody like that. This whole building could be destroyed, and you'd still be able to access our site and watch our shows. It's great, right, to have that. But not every company is fully in the cloud. So if you've got on-premises data, databases, servers, any kind of customer data, you need to start planning for how you're going to keep that data safe. If a hurricane destroys your building, how do we keep that safe? And there's tons of plans I could tell you, but if you only have 3 days, right, what can we realistically get done in 3 days without having to do vendor bid analysis and equipment purchases and ordering and signing up with a contract for Iron Mountain or somebody to take offsite backups? What can we actually achieve in 3 days? And on this one, there's actually quite a few options.
Yeah,
right?
we have easy stuff, right? Maybe your business isn't very large. You've got just a bit of data, maybe just a few terabytes or something. You can go with something like Dropbox. Just make a backup, put it into Dropbox. That way it's up in the cloud. If your servers are destroyed, not a problem. Dropbox has a copy. And then when you get back into business, you can just bring it on down, and there it is. You don't have to worry about it. They put those things in areas if they know that a hurricane is going to maybe come blow away their data center. Guess what? They move all that data away to another data center, and you don't have to worry about it. That's the whole, that's the best part of cloud services, is they're doing all that stuff for you. You don't have to do it.
Yeah, and let me throw out a word of caution though. Like services like Dropbox and CrashPlan that offer unlimited backups or huge amounts of storage like that, they all suffer from one problem, which is they rarely have their own storage. They're usually using like Amazon S3, and to keep their cost low, they throttle bandwidth. So Dropbox, for example, if you have a large data set, it can take a long time to get your data into Dropbox. For example, we actually did back up a storage appliance here over the Christmas holidays. We had about 30 terabytes of data, and it took over a month to fully load into Dropbox. I know, and we have a 200 megabit fiber connection here in the building, so it wasn't our bandwidth that was the problem. It's that it's being throttled on there, and they've got hundreds of thousands of customers, maybe millions of customers. So you're all vying for that bandwidth. And if you've got a large data set, some of those solutions, if you've only got 3 days, are just not going to be enough. So be really careful with that. You might say, you know what? I've only got 3 days. Let me sign up for CrashPlan. It's cheap. Yeah. They're a great company. They have a great product. But 3 days is not enough to get your initial data set in there.
Yeah, definitely geared towards something that's a much smaller set of data. You're a new company, a small company, not a ton of data going on here. If you do have that level of data that you need to move, you definitely got to go with something more enterprise level, right?
Yeah, and those, even at the enterprise level, though, those guys, they assume that you've got plenty of time to send your initial data set up, and then after that, you're just sending up changes. So your backups are really, really fast, but that first backup takes a long time. So if this is your first one, plan for that. And that's where other services, like using Amazon S3, they actually give you a lot more bandwidth for doing that upload. You can get data into there a lot more quickly. Be really careful though, because it seems like every week there's a news release about a misconfigured S3 bucket leaking company data. So be careful there. But another one that I'd like to recommend, and most of you know me as a Linux guy. I like Linux, but Microsoft Azure actually has a lot of great technologies in it, and they deploy more Linux VMs these days than Windows. So
which is so ironic.
It's neat. But they have a cool product. Let me bring this up here. And it's called Azure Site Recovery. And what you can do is you install this little agent on your machines, and they support Windows and Linux. And this agent will back up your systems. It'll back it up into Azure, so I can deploy there. And they have great speeds for this. When you upload it, it goes really fast. The neat part is when there's a failure, you can reach out to them and restore your data, or you can say, you know what, take my backup and just turn it into a virtual machine in Azure. And you can basically move your entire environment into the cloud. So maybe you back up to them, the disaster happens, but all your servers are fine. And so when you're done, you just go and delete all the backups, and that's that. It's over, right? Or maybe you back up all your data to them, and then the disaster hits, and your building is destroyed. You lose everything. Well, how long is it going to take you to buy a new building? How long is it going to take to order new servers and have them delivered, right? That whole process, that takes time. Well, with Azure Site Recovery, you go and you click a few buttons and you say, you know what, just power these up as VMs. Yeah. And now your data center is in the cloud, and you've got this whole kind of recovery mechanism. And I used to joke about this because I used to teach a lot of courses on migrating data to the cloud, and I always said there were 3 different ways to migrate data. There was to go all in and just say, that's it. I'm going to shut my local servers down. Everything's going to be in the cloud. Or you could do a hybrid cloud where you start moving the servers one by one. And so you got some things in the cloud, some things local, and you kind of wade into it, right? But my favorite one was what I called migration by accident. And that's what Azure Site Recovery is that you might back up all your stuff into Azure, and then when the disaster happens, you say, you know what, just spin it up there. And then when it's all done, you're like, I kind of like having it in the cloud.
Working.
I'll leave it there. And so you just migrated to the cloud by accident.
Plus you get a nice insurance check for all those servers you had.
I hadn't really thought about that. That's the silver lining on the disaster. Right. So key thing here, back up your data offsite, okay? And cloud services make that easy. if your data set is not so large. The larger your data set is, the harder it's going to be able to back that up in the time frame you've got. So if you've got limited time, be aware of that. And when you start that backup, monitor it, because you need to have a good idea. Is this going to be done by Monday? You know, in our case, anything that we started today would have to be done by Monday. And our data set is way too large for that. So, but we planned for that early on. It's already taken care of, so we don't have to worry about it. So definitely do that. Speaking of offsite backups,
Yes.
we could just say, you know what? I'll do it myself. Hard drives are cheap.
True.
Or maybe magnetic tape if you still have that. Hopefully not, but if you do,
LTO6 device on eBay maybe gets you a day or two.
So you do your own backup, and then you take the backup with you. Okay. Well, now we've got to worry about two things. You know, one is the security of the data.
Right.
All your company's data is right there in your possession. If it gets stolen or lost, that your company is now treated as having a breach, even though it wasn't a hacker, but your data has been leaked. So that would be a problem. The other thing is, where are you going to take it? Right? If I just live down the street from the office, I'm not really achieving anything.
Not really taking it away from the disaster zone, right? You do want to get some decent distance between you and where the disaster might be happening. Otherwise, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, right? You've effectively just worked yourself into doing nothing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you don't wanna
really.
do that.
My home, for example, is not that far from the office, and so for something like a hurricane or even an earthquake, which we don't have in Florida, those having it at home, having it here would really make no difference. In fact, it'd be safer here because the building is stronger. Right? It's practically a bunker. So I'd just leave the backup right in the server room, right next to the servers. It'd be much safer there than it would be at my own house. But if I lived really far away, or if I was evacuating, now it makes more sense, right? If I was evacuating, I might go and visit some family up in Atlanta, right? Now I'm pretty far away. The storm might not even make it there. So it makes sense. I'll take a backup with me and do that. But think about where you're going. You might want to nominate one person and say, look, you are going to be our offsite backup. I want you to take this data and get driving.
Right. And not only that, but how you actually move the data as well. As far as, I've got physical disks, I've put them, what do I put them in? A trash bag and take them with me? Or do I get a case that's meant for holding a magnetic tape media with a locking mechanism, maybe some waterproof sealant, just in case, right? Fireproof kind of thing, because you might be taking out of an unknown danger zone, but it might be going into an unknown danger zone. You can't predict that, so you want to keep it as safe as possible while you're transporting as well. Down here in Florida, it gets a little warm, so if you were, whatever reason, you're evacuating down into Florida and you threw it in the trunk of your car, well, it gets a little warm here, right? As I said, it might melt that tape. It gets very, very hot inside of vehicles, and we've seen it happen where tapes, like our old cassette tapes or whatever, sit them inside your car, they will warp and distort and melts.
Doesn't take much.
No, and you could do that to your tapes. You don't want to accidentally destroy it when you're trying to save it.
Yeah. So now that starts to become a little bit more of a long-term plan. Like if I wanted to get one of those tape carriers, I don't know that I could. Amazon Prime.
They're still shipping stuff here.
That is true. They are still shipping stuff here.
I was wondering why everybody was running out and getting water. I was like, go to Prime. There's water. Case of it.
Amazon Instant or something.
Come on.
So, but it all kind of comes down to how much time you have to plan. Worst case scenario, you chuck them in a trash bag.
Worst case, right?
That's what you got to do.
Right. Contingencies.
All right. Now, the last one that I want to mention is physical security. Because, physical security for a lot of us, like our building here, our doors are locked. We've got key cards somewhere. I've got my key card to get in the building. During a storm like this, I don't have to worry too much about people getting in the building, right? Well, actually you do. That during a disaster is usually when you're at the most risk for physical theft, right? Unfortunately, at least here in the United States, for our international viewers, it might be different, but here in the U.S., during disasters like this, we've started seeing a pattern of malcontent, or I don't know what's the right word
I like
there.
to say it brings out the worst in some people because they see opportunity, and maybe they're that kind of person who likes to jump on an opportunity where I say an opportunity. It's for them an opportunity. It's for us a disaster, a tragedy, and they see that as a means of gain, and that's unfortunate, but it is a reality, and we have to prepare for that.
Yeah, and like the window that's behind you, Daniel, I know it's hurricane rated.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's cinder block rated.
Yeah,
So
I'm going to get out there and test that for you. I'll be happy to.
so if you've evacuated your employees and your building is empty and somebody decides to loot your building, right?
We have a lot of very expensive equipment in this building, Don. And if anybody were to know, they see our sign, it's ITProTV. Maybe they checked out our website. They live in the area, and then the hurricane comes through, and they know we've been evacuated. It's easy pickings, right?
Yeah. Now, usually local law enforcement, National Guard, people like that will help to prevent that. That's what we're seeing in Texas right now with Hurricane Harvey that caused all the flooding. They are protecting facilities, but it is really the highest point of risk for you as far as your data being stolen. All those times that we talk about securing data at rest versus securing data in motion, right? Like you have a website uses SSL, that's great, but when the data is stored on the hard drive, it's unencrypted. So encrypt your disks. And the main reason we say that is somebody might come and steal the disks. Well, for our servers, a lot of times we don't think about that. You're like, well, it's in my server room. It's locked. It's secured.
Who's some passerby is going to come by and snatch a drive out and run.
Yeah.
Right. Plus, hopefully, there's a lock on your server room as well as a lock into the building. Maybe even somebody, a physical person is there as well, greeting. Oh, you can't go back there until you've been given authorization to go back there. So there's layers of defense up to that. So you're right. We don't think of, well, what do I need that for? Again, it's just another layer on the onion. Why not is really the best question.
Yep. So if you've only got 3 days to plan and physical security is going to be a problem, you need to identify this, right? We need to figure out how we want to secure that. And I know some people rely on like off-duty police officers that you can hire them and have them guard your facilities. But during a disaster, there will be no off-duty police officers. So you might want to call around and look for some local security firms. But if an evacuation order is put in, the local security firms, they're covered by that evacuation order also. They're not emergency responders. They have to leave. So you need to secure those servers. You need to lock things down. In our case, we would still have time to encrypt those disks if it were necessary to secure that information. You'll want to make sure that you do that at least your server room is locked, that stuff is secure. All right. Now, let's talk about a couple of other last-minute things that we can do to make sure that we're in good shape. During a disaster, you usually want to plan on power failure, right? The odds are you're going to lose power. If it's a hurricane, tornado, earthquake,
Not me, Don. I went to Home Depot and I bought me one of them big old generators. I'm just going to slap it right in there. I'm good to go.
All right, so we joke about it, but realistically, there's a Home Depot
right there,
right across the street. Yeah. I could run over there and buy the biggest generator they have, and I can guarantee you they've got some.
Yes,
right?
they do.
If I know I'm going to lose power, we've got UPSs, right? But UPSs aren't designed to run for a long time, even the really expensive ones.
They're really just for graceful shutdowns.
Yeah,
right?
They give you like a 15-minute window that your equipment can gracefully shut down so you don't lose data, right? Or a 15-minute window so that a generator has time to power on and take over. Now, if you plan for this, you've already got a generator hooked up to your building that's being routinely tested every month, and they cycle the engine once a week and all that stuff, and you're good. But we're talking about not having a plan.
No.
So if you decide, okay, well, I know the UPS is only going to go so long, you can extend the life of that UPS by cutting off any non-critical servers, right? When you have a business resumption plan to get back to 100% functionality, you rank your servers. You have a criticality.
Yeah.
That's our new invented word for the week, criticality. And so your mission critical servers have to come back first. And then you've got your mid-tier servers, and then you've got your low-priority stuff like archive servers that you could bring up a month later and nobody would really care, as long as you were able to bring them up at some point. So your critical servers, your mission-critical stuff, you leave them on. You power off everything else. Right. Every other mid-tier or low-priority server, you just shut them down.
So
now they're
just
not drawing
power, and you don't actually need them running.
Absolutely.
And why expend the power on those non-critical systems?
So now maybe that 15-minute UPS window is 30 minutes, a little bit longer, right? So you eke more life out of that power. But it's not forever, and that's where a generator can come in. Now, if you don't have a generator already, it's too late to get one professionally installed. So that means it's going to be amateur hour, right? And when you have it professionally installed, it's nice because they can put it onto a circuit so that you're drawing power off the battery. The battery loses its main power, flips over to generator, and then the battery is now being powered off of the generator. Your servers never reboot. Everything is fine on a professionally installed system. But If you're doing it amateur style, grabbing your own generator,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to have that. So what you're going to do is you're going to have to go to battery. You're going to have to physically unplug the battery from the wall because you can't draw power from two sources without frying your equipment.
that would be bad.
You'll have to unplug your battery and then plug it into the feed coming from the generator. Okay, so you're going to have to be there to do it. There's none of this. I'm going to go home where it's safe and leave. You're going to have to plan to be there for it, but you can do it. Right. But I do want to throw out a super important word of caution about generators. We see this in Florida every single year, and it's tragic that people don't know how to use them. And generators are typically powered by regular gasoline or diesel, usually diesel. And they'll buy a generator, they'll wheel it into their home or into their office, they'll fire it up, and they'll get power. And then after about 10 or 12 hours, they die.
Yeah.
Right? It's an engine. It's a combustion engine. And so it's putting out
exhaust.
It's putting out carbon monoxide. It's a scentless gas, and it suffocates you. It slowly suffocates you, and you die. So that's not good.
No.
I mean, in case,
Make sure you buy a carbon monoxide alarm when you buy your generator, because just in case maybe carbon monoxide is seeping in. Obviously, putting it inside the building, probably not the best way to go.
Right.
But if you had to, for whatever reason, try to vent it somehow, and then make sure that carbon monoxide alarm is there just in case to let you know, hey, you're reaching dangerous levels.
Yeah, and if you got it professionally installed, it would either be outside or it would be inside with a shroud, a tube basically that's venting the carbon monoxide outside. If you don't do that, though, you're in real trouble. So the rule of thumb that I always tell people is just put it outside. Your generator needs to be outside. You can run power cords through the building or whatever to get to where your critical areas are, but it needs to stay outside to be safe. It is really, really dangerous.
Just not well. Remember, what was the number one priority? The human factor, right? The human life. Make sure that everyone is safe, and then make sure your data is safe. So if you're basically introducing something that's dangerous to the environment, you're kind of violating rule number one there.
Yeah. So don't be afraid of generators. They're really useful, especially in a pinch like this where you might go. We've had it before. We went days without power, and if that happens, it's nice to have things online, as much equipment as you can. A generator will let you do that. Couple of things to think about with generators. There's usually a maximum amount of amps or wattage that it can put out. So you need to look at your equipment. And if you've got the time now, you can figure it out. Like, all right, here's my mission critical servers. What's their draw? What wattage are they pulling, or what voltage? You can kind of calculate it a few different ways and figure out what they're drawing. And once you know, you can make sure the generator will cover that. Or you can just go crazy and buy as many generators as you can get and try and overshoot. So you can certainly do that. The other thing is the fuel, right? A generator is going to require diesel or gas to run for a long period of time.
I don't know if you know this, Don, but the pumps around here are already bags over them. People are already running out of fuel, and we're quite a few days out.
Yeah.
So you might have a hard time finding fuel for it, or go MacGyver and siphon it out of your vehicle, or so start drilling holes in the tank and hey, we need these servers up and running. I got to sacrifice the car.
Yeah, something. There are some that do the biodiesel.
Oh yeah, that's
so
true.
you can put the
Pour some
French fry oil.
Yeah.
Powered
It
by
smells like
Crisco.
tacos. Find the joy in it.
Yeah, it smells great. So, speaking of fuel though, if you do buy it ahead of time, a lot of the containers that you buy at the store to contain fuel aren't designed for long-term storage. So if this is, I got 3 days, the hurricane's going to be here, you can go and buy those off-the-shelf containers, you can store it. But if this is like a long-term thing, you need to be storing it in metal containers, not plastic.
Right.
The plastic ones do break down over time. So, they're not designed to store large amounts of fuel for a long period of time. Diesel fuel also gels after a period of time.
That's
it
fun.
starts to solidify. It can ruin an engine, but even when it's just sitting there in storage, that can happen. So none of it's really meant to be kept for a long time. Now, we're talking about a short-term emergency here anyway, but what happens after the emergency?
Right.
Well,
what do you do with all that stuff now?
Yeah, you need to use it. You need to run your generators periodically as part of your test anyway.
Right.
So that becomes part of your long-term plan. And the nice thing about not having a plan is that the actual emergency helps you to build your plan.
It does do that.
Right? Because you look at what you did.
Trial by fire kind of thing.
You spot your mistakes. And you say, okay, now let's build a plan and let's not make these mistakes again.
Right. And now you have some equipment already in place as you're building a plan. Go, man, those generators are bought. They really worked out well. Now we just need to plan to store them and everything. It becomes a part of that and makes it a whole lot easier to transition and have that plan ready for the next time that this thing rolls around.
at the insurance company, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever got involved in this, Daniel, but every now and then I would request some kind of hardware or software, and I'd have to go through the budget process, get it approved. I have to do the business case scenario and all. But if there was a hurricane coming, I could get anything approved. Like,
Except that 42-inch plasma we never got.
I had to have that, right? But when a disaster is on its way, it's much easier to say we need to come off some cash,
Yeah.
and set up this plan. We need to go and buy that generator versus just on a regular sunny day outside. And I go to the boss and say, hey, I need to spend $4,000 on a building generator and another $4,000 on getting it installed.
He's going to laugh you out of his office.
Yeah, because the danger is distant, right? It's not going to happen
It's
to
not
us.
impending.
But when you've got this map,
this is happening.
then it becomes much easier for the boss to say, all right, let's do that. Here, you want to take my credit card? It's not, let's fill out a PO.
No, that's my personal card. Go get this done.
Yeah. So, do be careful though, especially if you're doing last minute things to get in there and shore stuff up, like throwing in a generator or whatever, that you do pay attention to the safety precautions. Some of the equipment is really dangerous. I can't stress it enough. Like every year people die from carbon monoxide poisoning, and it's not a mystery. It's not a surprise. We know about it. You just need to plan for it.
Yeah. You just don't want to overlook that fact because the life you save may be your own, right?
That's right. And knowing is half the battle.
That's right.
All right. So let's kind of recap what we talked about here. So number one, employee safety, right? Come up with a plan for how your employees should be. Do they come into work? Do they stay home? Make a phone list so you can reach out to those employees and make sure everybody's okay, as well as continue to communicate with them. Understand that not everybody's going to have power, so it can be difficult to communicate during a disaster. Number two, prioritize your systems, right? You need to come up with a criticality list. Servers that are mission critical that need to stay up or to be the first ones to get restored versus the rest, right? Number three, offsite backups. Come up with something. Use a cloud-based solution if you can. Be careful about the amount of time you have. If you have too much data, it's not going to be able to get up there in time. So use a cloud-based solution if you can. If you can't, plan for a physical offsite backup and take it far from the disaster, right?
Really,
You got to move it.
even if that's just, we don't have time to take a backup, snatch the drives out of the server.
Yeah,
and take them.
If you're resigned to shutting down.
Yeah.
Yep. Although you do introduce more risk there, like failed drives and other things.
Yeah,
but
you could have that, but it's
better than nothing.
Yeah, better than nothing.
And then lastly, plan for physical security, right? Understand that if your building is evacuated, you're not there to guard it. No. Your physical controls are going to become really important. So make sure things are locked. Also, put a little thought into it. What happens if power goes out, right? A lot of physical controls require power. We have magnet locks on a lot of doors here. Some of our doors, we never do the physical lock on them because the magnet locks are there. Right. But if we lose power, well, a generator kicks in. But when the generator runs out of fuel, if we're evacuated,
then what happens?
Now the magnet locks don't work.
They stop working.
And anybody could walk up and open that door. So you need to think about that, secure those doors, make sure that everything is protected. If you can, contract with local authorities or somebody to be able to make sure the building stays secure. Those are all different things that we can implement, and most of them you can implement in under 3 days.
Yeah.
In a pinch. In a perfect world, though, you'd spend way more than 3 days getting ready for this. And so use this as a lesson. Make sure that you correct for this after the fact and say, we need to spend some time coming up with a business continuity plan and a business resumption plan. Because otherwise, we're going to rely on one of the most important systems, right? A mentor of mine, one of the lessons he taught me early on was the definition of a disaster. And he told me that it's never a true disaster as long as at least one printer is still functioning. If at least one printer is still functioning, you can still print your resume.
That's right.
But,
as you walk out the door.
But if you can't print your resume now, it's a disaster, right? So hopefully it doesn't come to that. But so be aware of that. All right. Well, Daniel, do you have any other thoughts to throw in before we wrap up?
The only other thing I thought of was if you do take backups, you're doing these backup things, don't forget to verify those backups. Run some hash algorithm or something just to make sure. You'd hate to think, I backed up to the cloud or I backed up to some physical media and we're solid, we're safe. The worst happens. You go to implement those backups and they're corrupt in some way. So just once you do that, don't forget to verify them because that could be a safety step that you wouldn't want to skip.
Yep. And then my parting word of wisdom is, again, BRP, BCP, it is paperwork, it is bureaucracy. Most people hate that stuff. But at the end of the day, when you have a disaster, if you've got those plans, it's not a panic moment.
No.
It's not a freak out moment. You know exactly what you need to do. You know how long it's going to take. You've tested your backups. You know they work. And so now it's just a matter of running through procedures. You stay calm, cool, collective. When people are banging on your door and saying, how long until we're back online? You can say, hey, in my last test, it took 2.5 hours for us to get back online. So, reach back out to me in 2.5 hours. I'll let you know what our progress is. And it's just much better. So that's where you want to be in a perfect world. So just keep that in mind. And most importantly, for whichever disaster you're facing, make sure you stay safe and you'll get right through it. So. All right. Well, Daniel, I do thank you for joining us here in the studio again. Me. And for you out there in TV land, I thank you all for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Stay safe, and we will see you next time.